Hallelujah, hallelujah. We are live, family, so if we could draw the attention towards the front of the room, that would be fantastic. Today, me and my beloved brother Elisha, I'm Yahanathan, by the way. Hi, everybody. We're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We're going to try something different. We're calling this Operation M1225. Anybody want to take a guess of what that might mean? December 25th. Everybody else wants to take a guess? Good job. Okay, projecting. All right. So I'm gonna start out in the beginning. Man and women. It was good. There was an established order set from the beginning. Well, we know that Yah created all the living things, and then He decided to create man in His own image. And then He said, "You know what, Adam? You look kind of lonely down there. I'll give you a helpmeet." Thus Eve was conceived. So now we have this order: Yah, man, women. But it wasn't like it is today. It was more of a partnership. Eve was given to Adam to help. He had a task. I need you to name all the species, plants, animals, all of it. So he needed help. But then a funny thing happened. Well, I guess it wasn't funny, actually. Eve ate the fruit, the forbidden fruit, thus changing the trajectory of mankind. But let's read Genesis 1:27. Let's look into this. So Yah created man in His own image. In the image of Yah, He created him. Male and female created He them. 28. And Yah baruched them. And Yah said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and every living thing that moveth upon the earth." And Yah saw everything that He made, and behold, it was very good. In the evening and the morning, the sixth day. It was good. But, like I mentioned before, tragedy struck. She ate the fruit. She said, "Adam, you got to taste this, man. You got to taste it." So he ate it, and then they got kicked out. We know the story. But I think a part that we don't dig deep enough into is how stringent the outcome was for Eve and Adam at that, their punishment for eating that fruit. So it went from a partnership between Adam and Eve, man and woman, to a lordship of a man being over the woman. And we can even read a little bit about this in Genesis 3:15 and 16. "And I will put enmity between thee and woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." 16. "Unto the woman," He said, "I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee." Like I mentioned, it went from a partnership to a lordship. Now we're going to spring forward. 1956. Old versus the young.
So, old versus young, the divide. In order for them to bring us to the state that we're in today, they had to divide, as Matthew 12 and 25 says, and you see there's a division right now. He's going to get into man and woman, but there's also division in old and young and old right here. And I'm going to get into the different steps that they did and the different crafty counsel that they took to get us to this point. So, integration. This guy right here, MLK. I know everyone likes to say, he's such a great guy and stuff. What he did was so great, but it wasn't. I used to think that, we taught in schools and stuff, integration was great, get around, I had a lot of, Caucasian friends, and not to say that, I hate these people, but the honest truth is, and it's an unpopular opinion, integration was the worst thing that happened to us, and as we see, the young people were the main ones protesting. That's a lot of people don't know this, but the main ones that pushed integration, like MLK and stuff, who you're speaking to was the young people. The old people, they already knew. Like the young people, they were ignorant to what that would do, but the old people, they knew what that would do to our people if we integrated. And this is why MLK used words like "one day," or "I have a dream." He's speaking to the young people, not to get too gloom, doom and gloom here, but the old people, like, they're old, so they're coming up, on a limited amount of days, and so he's using words like this to gear towards the young people, because young people are dreamers, they're always thinking about the future, how their future will be like, and these words appeal to the young people. They so smart. They're so smart in how they operate and stuff, and they always go after weaker vessels, and you can go and play this video right here. Yep.
The parents hated his movement, and they wanted their children to stay out of it. Listen to this conversation this man had with John Lewis. These two are part of those cities.
What is that I got from my mom? God is spirit that hurts in a way. She said, dear son, I was glad to hear from you. I'm sorry too because I didn't sleep all night praying and crying and thanking God. He's been so good to you. Where are you fighting from? You don't have a family. Yet you remember who was helping you in school. It is the white people. What about the people of your race? Well, what are they doing? Remember, don't hurt yourself. When we were guys, I asked the white people to help you. They did. So you don't want to fight the people who are trying to help you. Remember, God will straighten out everything if you just give him time. You don't have to eat with the white people. And you live all these years, just pray and trust in God. You're not learning your lesson in school. God is nobody to play with. You're just making disturbance. See, she didn't give a compliment in clothes, anything. She looks like, man, look. Gosh, I know she cares for me, I know she loves me, but she just don't understand. She just don't understand, you see what I mean?
The mother did not want her son in the movement and wanted him to trust in God. But he rejected his mother and said she just didn't understand. And they went out there pushing this agenda. And ironically, now as adults, our parents, who were the baby boomers, they chastise us, saying that we don't understand. So their parents didn't understand them, and us as their children don't understand them. They obviously were just a generation on their own. But I'm getting off track here. These young baby boomers, they didn't know how the world really worked. And some of these men were Masons and trying to move up the ladder, yes. But as a whole, the young people, they didn't really understand how the system worked. They just knew what they were told. So what I'm saying is that this civil rights movement that everyone today looks at as a great thing, it was not fully endorsed by the older generation.
Yep. And thank you, True, for editing it. He did a great video on this. But yeah, a lot of people don't know, at least a lot of my generation and stuff, and that wasn't in that time and stuff, don't know who was really pushing it. It was these younger kids and stuff, pushing for this, and they knew their target group. And a lot of people also don't know this. Our people had land and businesses in the communities we were in before integration. We had land, like there's a lot of different shows I've seen and stuff, where it's talking about moving on up and stuff like that, moving off the land, like it's like you're moving up. No, you're not moving up, we were self-sufficient, and they manipulated us and stuff, into moving out of that. And it says, and their children would help work the land and run the businesses, as we see in the scripture and stuff, like the children were on the land and stuff, until they either married or was doing the Most High's work and stuff like that. You know, they was running the land, they was working the business, you know, and the parents taught them and stuff, you know, with the experience they had, and the kids had the strength to do it. And then, but because of the integration, their children, their help, left and chose to go to the city to work for other people. So they convinced our young people to move off the parents' land and go and work for them and be in a Western state. Like, it's so insane. Like, like the integration was so bad and stuff, you know, for our people. You know, as we see in Matthew 4:18 and 22, click on that. Because we had traditional ways, like, and it made sense, you know. It allowed us to prosper and grow. See, and it says, actually, this is up here about the top. And Yahshua walked by this is Matthew 4:18 and 22. And Yahshua walked by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he said unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And straightway they left their nets and followed him. And going on from thence, he saw another two brethren, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in a ship with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called to them, and they immediately left the ship and their father and followed him. So you see, these sons are working with their father. You know, that's what happens and stuff. Like, a lot of times and stuff, you'll usually take the trade of your father. You know, so if you're a carpenter, most of the times the fathers will teach their sons and stuff carpentry. You know, so this system works. Like, it allows you to build up a family business. So it keeps everything in the family, it keeps everything in the community. You know, and unfortunately and stuff, you know, they convinced us to move out of this. So this is the first part, is integration, and how they destroyed our people.
Now we're going to hop back in time to 1870. 1870, this was the mark of the Second Industrial Revolution. And for those of you who do not know or are not familiar with Industrial Revolution, it's basically a time period in history where technology exponentially, like, we start learning and making more stuff, just in general. New technologies, more factories, more people being put to work. This is the second, 1870. Now, what was interesting about this, 1870 between 1914, anybody know what happened kind of leading up to that early 1900s? Anybody know? What'd you say? Cotton gin. I guess I'm more so looking for an event. World War I, right? You know, there was a whole lot of build up to that point, and the USA gets involved for whatever reason they wanted to get involved. So then we see a lot of the workforce. You know, you got these new factories and whatnot. A lot of the workforce leaves to go fight over in Europe, right? And so the women are left to basically pick up where the men left off. So now they're going to the factories, they're getting their hands dirty, they're making the ammunition. You know, they're all, this is what women can do. And while, yes, the country thrived economically, I don't want to say thrived because there was a Great Depression, don't get me wrong, but they were held up, I guess you could say, by the women in the workforce. But what did that mean when the men came back home? So it's an interesting story. Yes, so women were integrated into the workforce. Let's go to the next. But we're going to take another jump to 1919. So this is right after World War I. Women became a bit insatiable. They wanted more. Men came home and took their jobs back and was like, go back to your place, woman. I'm paraphrasing, but I imagine they said something to that effect. And so they was like, nah, well, we just as good as you. We've been out here working and we held the country up and we want our dues. 1919 comes around. Anybody know what happened in 1919? Significant historical event? No? Okay. It's not what I had in mind. Women's suffrage. They got the right to vote in 1919. After several years of, picket signs and protesting, they got the right to vote. So the women really felt like they could take over men's work. But it had like this weird effect. I won't call it weird because you working in this dirty environment, you're going to pick up dirty habits. You're going to start talking rough and rowdy. And when men came back home, they was like, that's not, I don't know who that is. She ain't mine. Nah. So, but women, after all this, began to see themselves as equal to men. And this is contrary to the structure that we see back in Genesis. Now let's hop to 1949. There's a big boom taking place. I ain't talking about a bomb, I'm talking about babies. A lot of babies being made. This is the baby boom. Anybody familiar with that? Okay, so this is right after World War II. Okay, so not the first one, the second, with Nazi Germany. So let's set a premise. So once again, we have all the men, most of the men away in a different country fighting for their lives. And once again, the women have stepped up and filled in the jobs. They're working in these refineries. They're making the iron and whatnot to build the ships and the planes, and they're doing all this laborious work, right? So the men come back home, and this time there's still that attitude of, well, y'all can do it, we can do it, we can even do it better. But this time, when the Americans came back, they came back with a lot of money. Not the soldiers individually, but the country as a whole. And it really uplifted us economically. So with that, people making more money, they get to move and get a better house, and let's just say babies are being made very rapidly, may I add. Those are interesting statistics. The average woman got married around 20 years old during this time. Just 8% of the married women in the 1940s opted to not have children, compared to 15% in the 1930s. Basically, in so many words, there was a lot of babies being made. But another interesting thing happened during this segment. We see a clear division and distinction in our social classes. We know there's always the rich and the poor, but during this time, there was a distinct third class that came to light, the middle class. This is where a lot of these baby boomers ended up kind of forming. I'll just read from the side. Many families who could afford it moved to suburban areas. This middle class society had particularly confining effect on women. So there's books like Don't Be Afraid, To Marry Young, Cook to Me is Poetry, Femininity Begins at Home. Now, contrary to kind of what we probably thought happened, a lot of these men that kind of, ran their houses in the middle class were promoting, and as long as older women at this time were promoting, middle class women, y'all should stay at home. That's why we get like these retro TV shows where the mom walks in with a skirt and an apron, and she's pattering and pampering all the kids and stuff. Now that's the image that they wanted to paint these middle class women being all pristine and white and forget I said that. So they urge women to leave the workforce and embrace roles as wives and mothers. So a glimmer of hope, you may say. But this didn't translate very well to the lower class, where most of our people resided, especially at this time. But the idea was that the women's most important job was to bear and rear children, which I know talk to a lot of women today, they take that like as an offense. Like, you want me to just stay at home locked up? Like, yeah, that's how you feel? That's how you feel. But during this time, there was a large migration, like Elisha hit on, around this 1960s-ish era. We saw, 6 million African Americans, Black Americans, migrate from the deep south to the north. Now, this happened over about 30, 35 years worth of time. But when they migrated, they moved into large urban centers, which we know is downtown, the West End, where we exist dense populations. And like I mentioned earlier, our men returned home from one war. Our men returned home from one war just to fight another. 1967.
So, what's next that caused the divide between the old and the young? Well, college, actually, the school system. So, when they integrated our young people, they also had, that wasn't the only thing, that was just the first step. The next step is to teaching them how to move, how they want us to move, different from our traditional ways. So it reads, Brown versus Board of Education, a Supreme Court case outlawed segregation in schools in 1954, but the vast majority of segregated schools were not integrated until many years later. So it took time for this to happen. And you can click on
This one? For the video?
Yes, yes. Keep scrolling. Scroll back. Should have highlighted it. Yeah, it's not here. Yep, right here. I'm just going to read some of the text just to give you a little history. And about HBCUs, so HBCUs was really like that start, the starter colleges and stuff, for a lot of people. A lot of people have a lot of praise for HBCUs. I still look at them as still teaching the same curriculum as the others. They just have a lot of people in there, So, not surprisingly, the HBCUs mostly in the ex-Confederate states carried the burden of education for African Americans from the Civil War through the Civil Rights era of the 1960s. As of late of 1967, these institutions enrolled approximately 80% of melanated college and university students throughout the United States. All right, so this is where our people went, our young melanated kids went, as these HBCUs. Some integrated also into these other schools, but they're all under the same boat. We can go back to the next slide. So, one of the big problems when this happened was the older generation that were raising these young folks. They there's this whole thing about intelligence, right? This IQ. A lot of it's based off of what they believe is intelligence. A lot of the stuff that they base our intelligence off of is not necessary. You can make a living off of the things that we were doing. And the problem was these parents of these kids, they were intelligent in other ways, just intelligent in ways of agriculture and other stuff, doing things with their hands, building things. Where the kids, they're trying to get these kids from that. So what happened was the intelligence flipped and widened between young and old people. So I mean the intelligence in the sense of like math, science, stuff like, like this information in these books. Not to say that older people wasn't smart, but there was starting to be a gap because they never went to college. They never went to these schools, so all they knew was really agriculture, their different trades and stuff that they had. But the younger people that were going to these schools, so the intelligence gap was widening. And this, it's like a power dynamic, because what is supposed to happen is, you're raising up a young child and stuff, you're teaching them different things. You usually should know way more than them, and be more experienced, than them. It was teaching them different trades, stuff, different experience. And the child looks up to you for that information. Well, when this happened, things flipped. And now the kids became smarter than their parents. So obviously this became, there was a power struggle there, right? For authority. And as we see and stuff, it reads in Proverbs 20 and 29, the glory of a young man is their strength. That's where I remember going back to their businesses, the land and stuff. They taught the kids, and the kids have the strength to do the work, right? And the beauty of an old man is his gray head. Also, the wisdom, the experience that he has and stuff, Well, they took this script and they were like, now let's flip that around. Actually, not really flip, because old people didn't have strength either and stuff. So let's just turn this whole thing around, and they, they did a number, and they're so clever and stuff, how they operate. You know, it's a thing of like good wisdom and bad wisdom. You know, and they have the wisdom, it's just bad, and they mess up the power. You know, mess up the power dynamic. Had the from the old teaching and young. So we can actually click on this video right here. He's going to explain a little bit.
In the black community.
Oh.
We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that stuff.
In the black community, we were prepared by setting certain goals, objectives for ourselves. This was done primarily in the home, in the church, and in the school at the particular time, because schools had a heavy reinforcement into our characters because they were black schools. Schools were not integrated at that time. You know, do the best that you can with your life. You are unique. You have a contribution to make. You have something to offer. You have talent. You have skills. Many, many other things that you do have. Go on out there to the world and get it. Don't stay here in Farmville. There's nothing here for you. You know, it's a retired person's town, in a small place of this nature. But go on and develop it. College. You can't go to college to pick up a good skill. Skill trades were heavy then. We moved away from that. But in the 50s, skill trades were very heavy. Masonry, carpentry, electronics, auto mechanics, and many, many others. So we were encouraged, pardon?
Until your lack of employment, the young people have to go away from home. You know, every summer,
Right.
most of the young people had to go to Atlantic City to work.
Relative to white America, we were taught that a lot of the values that came into being were set by middle class, let's say white America. In a way, we were to emulate them, you know, because at this point we were at the very threshold of integration. Emulate them, take on many of these as much as possible, middle class values and virtues. There was a kind of inferior stigma placed on black people. But you had to look through it to see exactly what, you know, the real truth behind it. That is a stigma of inferiority. You know, you're not exactly where you should be. You know, but you need to do this, you need to do thus and so. In order to be accepted.
So that's the key thing, is that inferior state. So with these kids now, they already got hyped up about, I have a dream, you know, of this and that and stuff. You know, their hopes is high. So now the biggest thing is they start preparing themselves. They're like, okay, how can I be like these other people? I mean, there's just so they know what they're doing, you know. And eventually, you know, it went from no land, don't be a farmer. No, who wants to be a farmer and stuff? No, come work and get a degree. And then moved off of family business. Now, forget that family business. And a lot of our family business actually started getting closed down during this time because the kids wasn't working yet and stuff. You know, they were struggling, you know. This is why the scripture is so key and stuff, you know, and the old men having the wisdom, the experience, and the young men using their strength, you know, to operate, you know. And then later on we get technology, which will even further the gap even more, because these parents and these older individuals didn't have the knowledge of these things that these kids were getting taught. So move on to so the divided beliefs and values and lifestyle, right? So this is around the 1970s, and I'll just read. During this time, after integration, other movements were going on, like the sexual revolution and the hippie movement, which promoted drug use and obviously provocativeness, you know, and other stuff. So, you know, MLK and what he did, you know, integrating our people, the timing is so crazy and stuff. It's not a coincidence and stuff, or how all this stuff came about, you know, and all these different movements just coincidentally and stuff, you know, started going on during this time. He integrated our people into these things, and with the young man, you already heard, you know, the one boy speaking about, you know, my parents, they just don't understand, you know, he's, you know, in delusion, he don't get it and stuff, you know, And when they integrated with these people, they took on these different things. Our people was not doing drugs. They were not doing drugs and stuff. But that's not our people. You never see that and stuff. With our people, we're not into that type of stuff. We took on these things from those hippies and stuff. And that whole crazy stuff. And our people had the highest marriage rates and stuff. Before you had all this feminist and sexual revolution type of stuff. And a vast majority of our people was conservative during this time. So here's the problem. So now you got all these young people moving and integrating with these people and taking on these type of things, that is very progressive, or what they say left wing, type of stuff. Our people were conservative. They were considered conservative. They would be considered Republicans. We had very traditional type of values. And this was a problem because young people were integrating with these people, and taking on these customs. Actually, you click right here in that slide, because the data is crazy for the marriage rates. That was one of the biggest things, that I was very surprised of. Let me scroll till we get to the line graph. Okay. No, scroll right here. So, this is melanated women's marriage chart. So you see, this is not married. So this is women that were not married. So you see, this is the other nations right here. This line going up like this. This is our people. We was married. This is 1890s all the way up until 1970. Up around this time. This is where you got all the hippie stuff. You have the sexual revolution happening and stuff like that. And then this is when you start to begin to the 25%. 25% of all melanated people during this time, 2010, age 35 and older, not married, or never married. And for men, you can scroll down.
Scroll down.
Yeah. Same thing. And then the same time period, they crossed a little bit ahead of time. But yeah, 1950, 1960, around this time period. Yep. And then this is when you start to see not married. There was 2010, they said about the same, 25% not married, over 30. They were never married, over 35. And this is what they did. It aligns perfectly with those different movements coming out during that time. The hippie movement, the sexual revolution. And we can go back to the slide. And then you got the drug, thing and stuff that they push, with obviously the hippie movement, it was really sad. This caused a rift between the old and the young, because the young began to become more progressive, liberal, and started taking on their ways, I understand from the old people's perspective, and the older people's perspective, looking at their kids, and seeing them take on their ways, I would be disconnected too and stuff. My son, if I taught him right, he just goes off, he comes back and he just doing drugs, he's not trying to, be traditional, not trying to get married. I would be upset too. So this is where it started. They knew exactly what they was doing with the different movements, changing our beliefs, values, and lifestyle, and it all lines up, and it's not a coincidence. So why it does.
All right, so we're going to linger around the same era, 1964. A new age, or is it a world on fire? I know what I personally believe. 1964, the Civil Rights Act. It was a huge thing for our people. Martin Luther King got a huge part to play in getting that. If you just research 1964, I guess like 1960, 1965, that era, there were so many events that happened. Not enough time to dive into each one of those. But the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. One of the largest, they call it the crowning legislative achievement of the Civil Rights Movement. But it's not what we thought it was. The ramifications of this, have been detrimental. Matter of fact, the year afterwards, President Lyndon declared a war on crime. Now, you know about that, war on crime. since now we have all these black folk that are trying to move up in the world, you know, trying to make way for themselves, trying to make themselves equal to the white man, we got to figure out another way to get them out of the picture. So, Lyndon, funny name, Lyndon B. Johnson declared a war on crime. This basically means let's come up with reasons to arrest black men and incarcerate them. And it is insane the amount of our men that got locked up for pointless stuff, just silly stuff. And for families that were separated by the imprisonment of the man of the house, the women were left to figure out how to survive and provide. It's the natural order of things. There's actually an interesting chart that's cut off a little bit, but you see in the 1970s, so this is like pretty much right after this bill was signed, we see 196,000 approximately. This is, and you can't see the title, but it's black imprisonment. And just look how the numbers shoot up, like exponentially after that. Insane. It's horrific, actually. There's some pictures as well. Let's move forward, though. 1980. Oh, yeah.
So, 1980s, and actually, can we go back 2 slides to my last one? I got a video. I'm not for sure a lot of people watch this. It was the one before this. Or maybe after the MLK one.
Okay. Yeah, it's back further.
Yes, that one. I want y'all to see.
See the answer to our problem in Russia. So my slogan is not burn paper burn. My slogan is build, baby, build. Organize, baby, organize. Learn, baby, learn, so that you can earn, baby, earn.
Can you pause that real quick? This is at the man himself, his words. Probably a reason why they, had to get him out of here after this. We struggled hard and long for the victories we have attained. Yet, there's something that troubles me deeply. For all the civil rights and all the things we've done, I have come to believe that we are integrated into a burning house. Integrated into a burning house. He unfortunately, there's a lot of questions and stuff, to who he was alive to, but at the end of his, this is at the end of his life, before he got killed, he came to this revelation, after seeing our people that, the movement that, he pushed, hurt our people bad, and actually he ended up putting our people in a worse predicament than if he did nothing. So a lot of people don't know this. They won't speak about this ever. I never heard this in school. We had, I know you know and stuff, many MLK, every MLK day, they're speaking all about this, that is showing us movies. Never heard about this though, and coincidentally enough, he ended up dying after this, so fortunate. But yeah, integrated into a burning house. We can go back to the one slide. All right, so this is the 1980s. Things are ramping up now. So it reads: towards the 1980s, melanated people were fully integrated. So we're pretty much fully integrated by this time, and they began to be influenced by the culture different from before. So this is where they really started being influenced. But actually, they gave us a new culture. They influenced us to their culture, and it was like, no, this ain't bad enough. Let's give them a whole new culture, even worse than what we're doing. This is the music era. So this is why you start to see gangster rap come on the scenes, and we can read in Wikipedia about some of these people. There it goes. All right, so I'll start at the top. So you want to highlight it? There it goes. Gangsta rap it says gangsta or gangsta rap. initially called reality rap, is a subgenre of hip hop that conveys the culture and values typically of urban gangs and street hustlers. So this is the new culture that they gave us. It was like, we're gonna take you from our culture, give you a little bit of ours just to get you, out that culture, and then we're gonna give you a whole new culture, something that if our forefathers seen, this, they would probably fall out. Like it would be, it'd be bad. Emerging in the late 1980s, gangster rap pioneers included Schoolie D. Now, some of these people I do know, some of these people I don't know. Of Philadelphia, Ice-T of Los Angeles, later expanded to California with NWA, Tupac Shakur. And in 1992, this is really starting to ramp up, get more violent, you had people like Dr. Dre and a rapper like Snoop Dogg and G-Funk sound. Gangster rap broadened the mainstream popularity, so it was very, very popular amongst our people. A lot of our people were listening to this music, taking on the different lifestyles and the culture in the music, and this was a problem, And I'm gonna read from this. When this younger generation got older towards the 2000s, so the generation that was taken on actually had a question, just to, because I wasn't around at this time, so I had to ask, he was the closest one died. So I asked him, I was like, yeah, so when these groups was popping up, who was listening to it during this time? He said the older generation, like 50s and up, they was really still, on their traditional time, But amongst like his crowd and stuff, some 30s, 40s, they was listening to it, but amongst his crowd. So now the 2000s come around, and these people are older now, and they're still listening to artists like this, and taking on this lifestyle. They continue listening and living this gangster rap. This caused a younger generation to start losing respect for the older people. So another thing about this whole power dynamic, older people just tend to act more mature and stuff, and during this time, in the 2000s, early 2000s and stuff, they overheard like this, sagging and stuff, like the kids, with the jorts, and, like, they doing the same thing as the kids and stuff. So the young people, they start saying, well, you doing the same thing as us, OG, like they lose respect, for them and stuff, because heck, they listen to the same music, they in the same thing, and these people they knew what they were doing. They're so patient, because they knew it would get to this point where the OGs, heck, they doing the same thing, and this music thing was one of the biggest things that really divided the old from the young, because that respect, once you lose the respect, it's over, you can go to your point.
So now we fast forward to today. Now we're going to wrap everything into a bottle. I'm laughing because it blows my mind. Let's take a look at some of these things. Divided world, I believe. So this is part of an article I pulled, The Changing Profile of Unmarried Parents. Just a brief highlight. I'm not even going to read all this. But I do want to read 1 in 4 parents living with a child in the United States today are unmarried. 1 in 4, it's 25%, are unmarried, driven by the declines in marriage overall, as well as increases in births outside of marriage. This marks a dramatic change from half a century ago, when fewer than 1 in 10 parents living with their children were unmarried. 7%. These numbers blow me away. By 2020, these percentages, never married, have jumped 51.4 for black men and 47.5 for black women. This is being never married. That is 51.4% of the black men, this is 2020, never married. Also in 2020, that's 47.5% of the black women never married. But it gets worse, unfortunately. There are more single-parent-headed households today than any other time in recent history. And 64% of millennial moms have a child outside of marriage. This one got me. 1.2 million divorces in the United States each year. I'm gonna say it again. 1.2 million divorces in the U.S. each year. That is absurd. It's a lot of.
Yeah.
A lot of I don't know. And now we got, millennials and Gen Xers saying things like marriage is becoming obsolete. What is the point? Why even do it? It's toxic. It's toxic. And there's a lot of factors that play into it. There's a lot of factors that play into it. And of course, it's not all on the woman. We have a huge part to play as well. But I do see like a notable shift in the role of women from like we viewed since the beginning to the early 1900s to now. Independence is a huge thing that's being promoted in the for women. I think some of these stats are interesting. I'm not going to read all of them off, but I'll read these. There are 74.6 million women in the civilian labor force, and almost 47% of the U.S. workers are women. And I don't have the exact number for this. We can just go 50 years back, but I can promise you it wasn't close to 47%. Not even close. Probably it'd be good if it was close to 10 to 15%.
Yeah.
But more than 39% of the women work in occupations where women make up at least 3/4 of the workforce. So now you have these workplaces where you're dealing with 33% women, like in this same spot. So now it's not just a woman at this company, now there's 3 women and another woman. Groups of women working in the same companies. And this one was interesting. It's not bad, it's not good, but I think it's an interesting fact that women own close to 10 million businesses. I believe this is just in America. 10 million businesses and account for $1.4 trillion in receipts. Interesting fact. Here's a question that's been asked recently. We see it pop on YouTube videos, see it on posts. Do women need men? Do women need men? I feel like if we're at that point in society where we have to ask that question, then we just know we need a lot of prayer, y'all. We need a lot of prayer. We need a lot of prayer. Because many women today have usurped the role of men. Taking the jobs, whether this is by choice or by circumstance. But it has completely reshaped the gender roles. And where we go from here is questionable.
Yep.
Also, you blame this child independent living for this. That's they
Should have put that in. Just that in music.
So, like Yahanathan said, that was present time, for men and women. Well, present time for old and young ain't looking so good either. Young people are struggling when it comes to building wealth compared to older generations. So some of the key things, I didn't know this until I really grew up and started really learning about finances. So a lot of people that a lot of older people that got houses right now, they got it in that 2008, 2009 range and stuff, when things were pretty cheap, on the cheap, and also, interest rates was real low and stuff, and they was just doing really well. So I see a lot of old stories, of people marrying at 22, owning a house already and stuff, 2 cars and stuff. It's like they was doing very good. Well, financially, speaking to a lot of young people, I work with them and stuff like that. They are struggling. Like, young people are struggling, and they do kind of have animosity and stuff, towards the older people, because from what I gathered is a lot of their parents don't really want to share with them, which part of it I can see, part of it I don't. Part of the reasons why a lot of parents won't give their child no money or nothing like that is because of the ways that they took it on. They're not traditional no more, and so they don't feel like they deserve it, right? So I kind of see where they're coming from, but it does cause animosity, and they know exactly what they're doing, and then also most young people are very progressive, just spoke to this point, in older generations, we still got older generations that tend to be a little bit more traditional. They're kind of progressive now as well, but they're not as progressive as these young people. It's kind of insane, where we at. They just allow anything. You can be a cat, dog, mouse, anything. It's really insane. And then for the older generation side, older generation looks down on younger people because they have a more cushier lifestyle, which is true. We do have a little bit more cushier lifestyle, you know. The only problem is we didn't choose it, you know. That's one of the biggest things, you know. But I do see where a lot of them coming from, you know, where it's like we should be able to do more. It is harder though and stuff, you know, with some of the different constraints, you know, especially when it comes to like finances and stuff during this time. It's just a lot more easier to build wealth during past time. So I do see, but that is the bad though. That's, you know, they're looking at the generations like, well, why are you complaining? You know, I grew up during this period, you know. And then also the older generation looks down on the younger generation because of the things they're into. But one of the biggest things is to note, like I heard a lot of people talk about the music and stuff, you know, the Sexy Reds, Ice Spice, NBA YoungBoy, all these artists and stuff, you know. But they originated from somewhere, and that's one thing that they don't consider is where it started. We just talked about the NWA. When I listen, like I've heard their like it is aggressive. Like they talking about killing, pushing drugs. Like they talking about the same stuff. They're just not so descriptive as they are now. Now they're more descriptive, you know, with it. But they're aggressive as well and stuff, you know. So they know what they're doing. You know, this is obviously the time we're in. Like Yahanathan said, need more prayer. You know, it's good to be informed about these things now. You know, we definitely now that we know, you know, we just try to do better. You know, but this is the divide. This is that you know, Operation M 1225. You know, that they did. So.
Yep, he said it. He said it. Matthew 12:25. And Yahushua knew their thoughts. He said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation. Every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. Whether we know it or not, we've been caught in the middle of a plot to destroy mainly our people.
Yeah.
Now, there's been residual effects amongst every race upon the earth. But they come for us. And it's always about getting the man out of the house. I know Old talks about that a lot. They want to get the man out of the house because I don't know if you notice a pattern, at least for the man and the women's standpoint. There's always a pivot when the man leaves, whether it's going to a war, another war, whether it's going to prison, because then when they come back, things are different because the women have to step in and take charge. And, you know, once they get up here, they don't want to go back down. That's just human nature. But, I mean, honestly, in my personal opinion, I don't think like we're going to ever reverse this effect. I think it's really going to come down to us understanding the truth, isolating from the rest of the world, and kind of like restarting our own communities the right way. That's what it comes down to. That being said, we thank you.
Thank you.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.